Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The tension inside the Abbott mansion had been simmering for days, but nothing, not even Diane's nervous whispers or Jack's silent pacing, could compare to the moment everything finally shattered. A moment triggered not by an adult, not by a schemer, not by an enemy at the gate, but by the smallest, gentlest voice in the entire family, Harrison's. For weeks, Kyle had been unable to sleep, unable to breathe properly, unable to make sense of the sudden fractures forming between him and Claire, the woman he had dared to trust with his heart after the wreckage of summer, after the chaos of Tara, after a lifetime of being pulled between loyalty and disappointment. Claire had been different, or so he thought. But strange little clues had begun to emerge. Random calls she declined with her hands trembling, hushed conversations with people he didn't recognize, unexplained disappearances at odd hours, and worst of all, Harrison waking up screaming from nightmares with only one name on his lips, Claire's. Kyle had brushed it off at first, refusing to believe she could ever threaten the little boy he had sworn to protect above everything else. But a father's instincts are rarely wrong, and the tighter Kyle held on to denial, the more violently fate pulled him toward the truth he refused to face. Jack and Diane had been careful not to push too hard, though both carried private concerns. Diane felt guilt burn inside her like a slow, constant fire. She had vouched for Claire, defended her, even comforted her, insisting that Claire's traumatic childhood and long path to healing made her vulnerable, not dangerous. Jack, meanwhile, struggled to balance compassion with caution, worried that Kyle, always too trusting, always too eager to fill the quiet spaces in his heart, was being taken advantage of again. And then there was Summer, silently watching everything unfold, torn between jealousy, protectiveness, and a dread she couldn't ignore. Something was deeply wrong. Still, no one expected the moment of truth to explode the way it did. It happened on a stormy evening, rain battering the windows so aggressively that the entire mansion seemed to pulse with the weight of the weather. Kyle had come home early from Marquette, earlier than usual, wearing the tight, strained look of a man who had reached his breaking point. Claire was sitting on the couch with Harrison, reading him a story, though even at a distance, Kyle could see her fingers trembling as she held the book. Harrison wasn't nestled against her the way he usually was. He was stiff, distant, eyes wide and wary, staring down at the pages as though forcing himself to pretend everything was normal. The moment Kyle walked in, Claire looked up sharply, her eyes full of the same guilt she had been trying to hide all week. Diane appeared from the hallway, her face instantly tensing at the energy between them. Jack stepped in behind Kyle, sensing trouble. And then it happened, the spark that lit the fuse. "Kyle, we need to talk," Claire whispered, rising to her feet as though preparing to confess something enormous. "I can explain everything." But Kyle's voice thundered through the room, raw, broken, and furious. "No more lies, Claire. No more secrets. I want the truth, all of it, right now." Harrison flinched violently at the shout, curling into himself on the couch. Diane rushed to him, her motherly instincts overpowering caution, but Harrison shook his head and whispered, "No. Daddy needs to hear it. Daddy has to stop." Claire's face crumpled, tears spilling instantly, and she reached toward him. "Harrison, sweetheart, please don't be scared. I would never hurt you." But the child's voice rose, shaky, tiny, yet louder than any scream in that room. "Daddy, stop." The whole world froze. Kyle, so blinded by fear and rage moments earlier, blinked and stared at his son as though seeing him for the first time. Harrison's eyes glistened with tears, his little chest rising and falling in panicked breaths. "Daddy, I have to tell the truth," he whispered, and the entire family held its breath because no one, not even Claire, knew what truth he was about to reveal. Claire's knees nearly buckled as she whispered, "Harrison, please, please don't misunderstand." But the boy shook his head again, firmer this time. "You told me not to say it," he said softly, voice cracking. "You told me not to tell Daddy or Grandpa or Grandma, Diane. But I'm scared, Claire. I'm scared of the man who comes to see you." Every drop of color drained from Claire's face. Kyle felt something inside him snap. "What man?" he roared, stepping forward. "What man is he talking about, Claire?" Claire reached out desperately, her words stumbling. "Kyle, please stop." But Kyle slapped her hand away, his breath shaking, and without thinking, without control, His palm lashed out across her cheek. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Claire staggered backward, stunned into silence, tears spilling freely now. Jack shouted, "Kyle!" And Diane gasped, covering her mouth, rushing instinctively toward Claire. But Claire shook her head violently and backed away, cradling her cheek, staring at Kyle as though he had just ripped open the sky. Harrison burst into sobs, loud, terrified sobs. "Daddy, stop!" he cried again, this time begging. "You hit her. Daddy, you hit her." Kyle froze, horror flooding him all at once, but the damage was already done. Claire wasn't angry, she was shattered. "I deserved that," she whispered through trembling lips. "I should have told you everything sooner. I never meant to hurt you or Harrison. I just didn't know how." Her voice wavered, breaking. "Kyle, the man Harrison is talking about. He's not someone I wanted involved in my life. He's someone from my past, someone who found me again." Her breath shook violently. "His name is Marcus, and he's my biological father." The silence in the mansion was absolute. Claire's biological father, the man who abandoned her, the man who sold her out to Jordan, the man who helped orchestrate her childhood nightmares, was back. And worse, he had been meeting her in secret. "Why?" Kyle choked out. "Why didn't you tell me he was back in your life? Why was he anywhere near my son?" Claire's voice cracked as she spoke. "Because he threatened me, Kyle. He threatened everything. He said if I told anyone he was in Genoa City, he'd expose something I've been hiding for years, something he said would destroy me. He followed me, cornered me, told me if I didn't do what he wanted, he'd hurt someone I cared about. And I thought I could handle it alone." "But what does he want?" Jack demanded. Claire swallowed hard. "Money, leverage, power. He hates Victor for what happened to Jordan. He wants me to help him get inside Newman territory. He's been forcing me to gather information. Anything he can use." Kyle stared at her in disbelief. "So all this time, the calls, the lies, the disappearances, it was him? And you didn't think you could trust me with the truth?" Claire collapsed to her knees, sobbing. "I didn't want you to look at me the way you're looking at me right now." Harrison ran to Claire, wrapping his tiny arms around her shoulders, shaking. "I'm sorry, Claire," he cried. "I didn't want Daddy to be mad. I just didn't want the scary man to come back." And suddenly everything clicked. The nightmares, the sudden fear, the clinging. Harrison had seen Marcus somewhere. The thought made Kyle feel sick. "When did he see him?" Kyle demanded. Claire wiped her tears. "Marcus approached me outside Harrison's school one afternoon. Harrison saw him grab my arm. I told Marcus to leave, but he scared Harrison. Then Marcus told him not to speak to anyone about seeing him or he'd come back." Kyle's entire body trembled with fury, this time not at Claire, but at the man who dared terrorize his son. "I'm going to find him," Kyle growled, his voice low, deadly. "I swear to God, I'm going to find him." Claire grabbed his arm, terrified. "Kyle, stop. He's dangerous. If you go after him, he'll retaliate." Jack stepped between them. Kyle listened to her. "This is bigger than anger. We need a plan. We need security. And we need to contact Victor. He'll want to know Marcus is back." But Diane had her eyes fixed on Claire. Not with anger, but with deep, heartbreaking sadness. "Why didn't you tell us you were in danger?" she whispered. Claire looked up at her with hollow eyes. "Because every time I need help, every time I think I'm safe, someone gets hurt. I didn't want to bring that into this house. I didn't want to ruin my chance at a real family." Kyle sank to the floor across from her, tears streaming now. "You should have trusted me," he whispered. "You should have trusted us." Claire nodded, sobbing harder. I know. I was wrong. I thought I was protecting you, and Harrison, but I made everything worse." Harrison wiped her tears with his tiny palms. "I love you, Claire," he whispered. "Don't cry." Claire held him close, breaking. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything." Kyle watched them, his son comforting the woman he loved, and he felt his heart fracture with guilt. He had slapped her. He had broken something fragile, something precious. Jack suddenly straightened, his face sharp. "Marcus is manipulating her, using her trauma, using her fear. We need to protect Claire as much as we protect Harrison." Diane nodded firmly. "We're a family." Claire is part of that. Whatever mistake she made, she was trying to protect us. Kyle reached hesitantly toward Claire, his hand trembling. She stared at it, unsure, scared. I shouldn't have hit you, he whispered, voice cracking. I'm so sorry. I was terrified and angry and I lost control. There's no excuse. Claire took a shaky breath. I forgive you. But things can't go back to the way they were. The words hit him like knives. Not yet, she added gently. But maybe someday. Harrison looked between them, tears still clinging to his lashes. Can we be a family? He whispered. Claire smiled softly, sadly. We still are, sweetheart. Just a family that needs to heal. Kyle looked at her, then really looked at her. Not as the woman he slapped, not as the person who lied, but as someone deeply broken and deeply brave. And then he saw something new in her eyes. Not fear. Not guilt. Resolve. We're going to stop Marcus, she whispered. But I'm not running anymore. Not hiding. If he wants a fight, he'll get one. Kyle nodded, feeling strength return to his chest. Then we face him together. And as thunder shook the sky outside, the Abbott family stood united. Not broken. Ready to protect each other. Ready to fight back, and finally ready to face the dark truth that had been hiding in the shadows for far too long. The moment after Claire's words hung in the air like a storm cloud, the Abbott mansion seemed to hold its breath, the rain outside tapping violently against the windows as though echoing the fear and anger that coursed through every vein in that room, and Kyle, still on his knees, felt an almost physical weight pressing down on his chest, a combination of guilt, rage, and desperate need to protect Harrison that made his muscles tremble and his hands shake uncontrollably. And as he watched Claire gather herself, brushing tears from her cheeks while holding Harrison close, the child clutching her tightly as if his very life depended on it, Kyle's mind raced with 1,000 terrifying possibilities, each one more frightening than the last. Marcus had been in Genoa City before, had managed to find Claire despite all her efforts to remain hidden, and now he was threatening her, threatening Harrison, threatening the fragile sense of safety they had painstakingly built for themselves. In the aftermath of past betrayals and heartbreaks, and Kyle's chest tightened painfully as he realized just how close they had come to losing everything, how easily one misstep or secret could have destroyed the family he had fought so hard to protect, and yet even as his mind spiraled, he knew he couldn't allow fear to paralyze him, couldn't allow anger to make him reckless because Marcus wasn't just dangerous. He was cunning, manipulative, and utterly ruthless, and underestimating him could be fatal, which was why Kyle rose slowly, his eyes locking onto Claire's, seeing not just her vulnerability but the steel she had somehow managed to cultivate despite years of trauma, and he realized that whatever mistakes had been made, whatever lies or omissions had caused this nightmare to unfold, they now had a single chance to confront it, to reclaim control over their lives, and to do so they would have to act together, united as a family, which meant putting aside anger, guilt, and resentment long enough to plan, strategize, and protect the most important person in the world to them. Harrison, whose small body now shivered in Claire's arms as his tears soaked her shirt, the innocence in his eyes contrasting sharply with the dangerous reality of the adult world that was closing in around them, and Kyle felt a pang of helplessness that made him want to scream into the storm outside, wanting to tear apart the clouds themselves just to make the sky safe for his son. But instead he clenched his fists, taking a deep, shuddering breath, and looked at Jack, who nodded firmly, silently agreeing that the first step was to gather information, to understand Marcus's movements, motives, and weaknesses, because in situations like these, knowledge wasn't just power, it was survival, and Jack had always been the one to remind Kyle of that even when his emotions threatened to consume him entirely, and Diane, hovering nearby with Harrison still in her arms, whispered softly to both Kyle and Claire that they couldn't let fear dictate their actions, that they had to trust each other, communicate clearly, and remember that the child at the center of this storm needed reassurance, love, and protection more than anyone's pride or anger. And as Diane spoke, Harrison peeked out from behind her shoulder, eyes wide, still trembling but listening, sensing that his parents and grandparents were trying to form a barrier against the terrifying world he had glimpsed only moments before, and Claire, wiping the last of her tears, nodded toward Kyle, her voice trembling but firm as she said, "We can't go it alone. Marcus is smarter than we know. He knows our routines, our weaknesses, and if we make a mistake, Harrison won't forgive us and neither will I." And Kyle's throat tightened because hearing her fear alongside her determination ignited something inside him. The same blend of protection, love, and righteous fury that had carried him through every past crisis, and he knew without a doubt that he would do whatever it took to neutralize Marcus, even if it meant putting himself in harm's way, facing threats head-on that no father or man should ever have to face. And as he formulated a plan in his mind, considering surveillance, allies, and potential traps, he realized that time was the one luxury they didn't have, because Marcus's moves were already in motion, subtle but deadly, and the longer they waited, the stronger he became, and the more likely Harrison or Claire, or both, would be harmed, and the thought alone made Kyle's stomach churn with a mixture of fear and determination, an awareness that inaction was tantamount to surrender, which he could never allow. And then, just as he opened his mouth to outline the first steps, Harrison spoke again, small but insistent. "Daddy, we have to stop him before he comes back." His voice, barely above a whisper, carried the weight of a child who had already glimpsed real danger and refused to be powerless, and that simple sentence crystallized everything Kyle had been thinking and feeling. Marcus had to be stopped, not just for Claire or for himself, but for Harrison, who was the heart and soul of their family, the reason every strategy and every risk mattered. And Kyle knelt down, holding Harrison gently, feeling the tremor of his small body, and said, "You're right, buddy. We're going to stop him. I promise." And Harrison's eyes widened slightly, tears still glistening but now mixed with a flicker of hope, a fragile thread that Kyle intended to protect at all costs. And Claire, watching this exchange, felt a swell of emotion that mingled relief with fear because she knew the road ahead was perilous, fraught with uncertainty and danger, and yet for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to hope, to believe that together, they could face Marcus, confront the demons of her past, and emerge on the other side not broken but stronger, united, and unshakable. And as the family huddled together in the stormy silence of the Abbott living room, Kyle's mind was already running through potential contacts, security measures, and alliances, including calling Victor, whose knowledge of Genoa City's underbelly and willingness to play dirty when necessary could turn the tide in their favor, and Summer, whose intuition and ability to gather intelligence could provide the inside track they desperately needed. And even though Kyle hated the idea of dragging more people into the danger zone, he realized that Marcus had proven himself capable of manipulating anyone he encountered, and therefore every ally mattered, every advantage was critical, and he couldn't allow pride or hesitation to compromise their safety. And as they spoke quietly, formulating the first steps of a careful plan while Harrison clung to Claire, the storm outside seemed to intensify, rain pounding against the windows like the heartbeat of the city itself. And in that moment, Kyle made a silent vow that no matter what Marcus had done, no matter the threats or the past betrayals, he would ensure that Harrison would never feel powerless again, that Claire would never face danger alone, and that Marcus would learn the hard way that the Abbotts, no matter how fractured by secrets or mistakes, would protect their own at all costs. And that promise, silent, unyielding, and ironclad, was a declaration of war. A signal that the events set in motion by one man's return from the shadows would now meet a force far stronger than he anticipated. A family united not just by love, but by courage, resolve, and the unshakable truth that some dangers must be confronted head-on, that some lies must be exposed, and that no one, not Marcus, not circumstance, and not fear, would ever control their lives again. And as the night deepened, the rain softened to a dull murmur. The Abbotts began to take deliberate steps, checking locks, monitoring entrances, coordinating with trusted allies, and rehearsing scenarios in whispers and gestures, all the while Harrison's small voice occasionally interjecting with questions, fears, or observations that reminded them all of what they were fighting for. And Kyle, for the first time since Marcus's name had entered their lives, felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and clarity, knowing that the road ahead would be dangerous, messy, and fraught with unpredictability, but also knowing that they had no choice but to face it together. And as he held Claire's hand, brushed Harrison's hair back from his forehead, and exchanged a silent nod with Jack and Diane, Kyle understood that the truth had finally come out, the lies were laid bare, and now it was time for action, for courage, and for the fierce, unrelenting love that only a father, a mother, and a family united by trust could summon when the shadows of the past threatened to consume everything they held dear. And deep in his heart, he knew that whatever Marcus had planned, whatever schemes lay ahead, they would meet them unflinching together, because this was more than a fight for survival. It was a fight for their family, their future, and for the innocence and safety of the little boy whose courage in his own quiet way had ignited the spark that could finally stop Marcus once and for all.